Hello, chosen ones. When heaven files a case, even silence serves as evidence. Allow it to settle in, since God isn't speaking right now. He's pacing the courtroom of heaven, robes swinging, eyes blazing. The gavel is ready to fall. Not on you, but on them. They believe they could harm an innocent soul and then walk away, as if the cosmos were blind. They believe that spiritual transgressions had no effects. Emotional assassins may escape unhurt. But this is the truth. In ancient law, giving false evidence resulted in more than simply disgrace. It was exactly the punishment they wanted for the innocent. So what happens when hundreds of people band together to oppose a single chosen soul, and heaven thinks it's time to settle the score? You've got it, mass spiritual expulsion. You're not playing fairly. It's performing well. Let's be honest. Some of these people are likely to discover the hard way that karma is more than simply a sentiment. It's God's legal helper. Oh, and if you've ever wondered whether God takes treachery personally, particularly when it involves one of his own, fasten your seatbelt, because we'll witness what occurs when divine judgment is no longer postponed and becomes a threat. Let's get to it. Number 1, they did not just lie to you. They lied to the divine about you. They did not just lie to you. They lied to the divine about you. This is why God is displeased. This wasn't normal slander. This was not just someone ranting out of envy or malice. It was a spiritual attack camouflaged as minor gossip. They opened their lips and rewrote your whole tale, assuming no one would fact-check it, unaware that the author was listening. They attempted to make you seem guilty when you were nothing but humble, devoted, and silent. Even worse, they believed they were compelling enough to convince heaven. They weaponized words like daggers. They did not say, "This person has hurt me." They just said that this people is a problem. They did not just criticize what you did. They questioned who you are. And there is a difference. One is human conflict. The second tactic is identity assassination. These individuals distorted your name, insulted your career, and characterized your personality in ways that undermined your dignity while laughing as if it were nothing. That is why this extends beyond karma. This is now personal to God. They didn't only insult you. They mocked God's choice to choose you. When someone ruins a particular person's reputation, they are not just carrying out a smear campaign. They oppose divine judgment. You did not appoint yourself. You did not anoint yourself. God did it. They then approached you as if you were a random individual. They entered a risky area. They believed they were talking about you with others, but they were really speaking out against you in front of the person who sealed you. It's like stepping into a courthouse and lying about an innocent person, believing the judge won't notice. They didn't comprehend that paradise does not need attorneys. God serves as a witness, judge, and verdict. When falsehoods are circulated concerning the innocent, divine judgment does not need defense. It elicits a powerful reaction. You most certainly did not say anything. You remained kind. You persevered. They forgot that when you were quiet, God was recording. Every wrong word they believe they've forgotten is now being utilized to expose their own spiritual repercussions. This is not just punishment. This is an excellent adjustment. And it is already in action. Number 2, they did not abuse you. They mocked God's choosing procedure. They didn't just abuse you. They mocked God's choosing procedure. That is what makes this distinct. This wasn't just about personal animosity, jealousy, or misunderstanding. It was deeper. They weren't disappointed with your personality. They were outraged that you were picked while they were not. It's not that you did something wrong. Your whole life as a chosen one exemplified spiritual rejection. They were unable to handle it. They couldn't see why God would choose someone like you over them. You did not match the picture they had in their minds. You were not loud, polished, charming, or damaged enough to meet the criteria of value. They waited for God to pick someone they could control, praise, or tolerate. Instead, he selected you. Quiet, very attentive, imperfect yet devoted. This interfered with their ego. So rather than accepting God's choice, they attempted to undermine it by pulling you apart. They presumed to have the power to overturn God's will. They thought their judgment of you would make you stop calling. They were convinced that if enough people despised you, heaven would alter its mind. This is how delusional pride manifests when individuals believe they are more virtuous than God. However, when they attacked you, they explained why they were not picked. Because a trustworthy servant of God makes judgments that do not raise controversy. They respect them even when they don't comprehend. You posed a spiritual danger not via what you said or did, but because of who you were. You demonstrated that God favors the invisible, overlooked, and misunderstood. You presented a dramatic contrast to their religious rites, phony humility, and self-proclaimed significance. Rather than repent, they retaliated. Unfortunately, it is too late to reverse what has been done. They did not just dispute your assignment. They questioned the person who had allocated it. Heaven does not take this lightly. They ridiculed the throne with their deeds. They rejected God's instruction. And now he's replying. Not in words, but in indignation. Because when humans attempt to disrupt divine order, they are not just exposed. They were corrected in front of everyone. Third, they wanted blood, not truth, since your innocence proved their guilt. They did not want the truth. They wanted blood. That's what made it so hazardous. Your innocence was not only dismissed, they actively despised it. You were not a danger since you had done nothing wrong. You were dangerous because you did not. You weren't disruptive, controversial, or dishonest enough to fit within their plan. So rather than leaving you alone, they attempted to destroy you. And not quietly either. They did it loudly, bravely, and unanimously, as if your demise was their prize. Your purity made them uneasy. Your tranquility annoyed their devils. Your capacity to stay courteous, grounded, and unconcerned in the midst of their attack demonstrated how corrupt they had become. They were unable to manage it. You didn't have to clap back or prove anything. Standing there with clean hands exposed all they'd been hiding behind. Fake smiles, made-up stories, and forced partnerships. They needed you to fall. They wanted you to snap. Because staying rooted would have broken their whole scheme. They needed something vile about you to justify the muck they were already drowning in. But nothing stuck. You did not give them what they wanted. And this drove them insane. So they acted like broken people do. They lied. They exaggerated. They created drama where none existed. They made their guilt into a trial. And let's be honest, not all of them were meant to damage you. They intended to erase you, harm your reputation, diminish your influence, and cancel your call. All because they couldn't take the fact that you walked with a feeling of favor. They never earned. It was not personal. It was spiritual. And when someone is spiritually out of sync, they will always desire to crucify what is pure in order to feel better about what is wrong. But God saw every twisted word. Every debate happens behind closed doors. Every trap is laid. And now he's responding. Not because you are faultless, but because you remained innocent in the face of obvious animosity. They were hunting for filth, but God discovered a pure soul. And now he's making a compelling case for justice. Number 4, God remained quiet. He was not missing. Rather, he was collecting receipts. They saw God's silence as assent. They read his silence as indifference. Or worse, he agreed with them. They didn't grasp, however, that God's silence does not imply that he is doing nothing. It's because he records everything. Every whispered slur, fake grin, each lie said behind your back. Heaven didn't ignore it. Heaven was archiving it. You weren't ignored. You were kept under watch. God did not intervene quickly because he understood that the truth had to be revealed without aid. If he had halted the storm too quickly, many would have questioned your authority. They would have thought you were rescued rather than good. But now there is no doubt. You didn't merely endure it. You remained clean throughout. And while they were busy creating traps, mocking, and awaiting your demise, God was preparing a legal case in the spirit that no one expected. Divine judgment does not always fall down like thunder. It might pile up like a wave. It's silent, heavy, and difficult to escape once it strikes. God hasn't forgotten what they did. He did not ignore how they handled you. He was only giving them time to repent. Not because they deserve it, but because you do. Because the compassion he showed them was his way of respecting the love you still had for some of them, even if they didn't deserve it. However, that moment is past. What's coming isn't emotional vengeance. It is a legal correction at the highest level. And it will be accurate because God acts calmly and without confusion. It comes with receipts. Nothing will be stressed. Nothing will be left out. Everyone engaged will get a percentage. Those who believe that if God existed, He would have stopped me are about to see what happens when God answers unexpectedly. You were not forgotten. You were guarded in slow motion. And now the judge is standing. Case closed. Number 5. They believed they were testing you, but they were on trial the whole time. They really felt they were testing you. You possess patience, strength, and character. They prodded at your wounds, pulled out your triggers, and waited for you to collapse, lash out, or lose yourself. They didn't comprehend you were never the one being tested. They represented your life, responsiveness, and tranquility. It all exposed them. Heaven took notes. God did not allow persecution to determine your survival. He knew you would. You were made for this. The genuine purpose was to reveal them, to demonstrate how much evil they were willing to ponder, speak, and do while believing there would be no repercussions. Your presence was a mirror. You voiced your jealousy. They attempted to dress up as anxious. You revealed what they termed protection. You were angry. They attempted to conceal by using false information. They may have walked away. They could have checked themselves. They may have chosen humility. Instead, they chose brutality. They selected it with full knowledge. They passed up every chance to offer their sympathies. They weaponized every fault you demonstrated. They failed the exam by indicating that they value correctness above righteousness. That's why God stepped in. Not because you couldn't handle it, but because they couldn't rely on your presence. They thought it was a game. They had no idea it was an inquiry. They thought they were observing your answer, but God was really watching theirs. How far will they go to bring you down? How far will they go to portray you as the problem? How much wrath will they vent in the name of the truth? That's what heaven wanted to see. Now that all is evident, judgment is coming. Not an emotional reaction, but spiritual duty. They were not exposing you. They were unveiling themselves. The mask has been removed permanently. What they misinterpreted as your collapse was really theirs under heavenly examination. And now they're the ones being sentenced. Not because you asked for it, but because they deserved it. Number 6, you were the lamb that was slaughtered. However, God prevents it this time in order to ensure their salvation. They treated you like a sacrifice, as if the suffering they inflicted on you would somehow purify them, as if shattering, humiliating, and isolating you was enough. Perhaps they'd feel more comfortable with their own darkness. They ascribed their guilt to your name, convincing themselves that their actions were justifiable. They weren't just harsh. They are computed. They got together, spoke falsehoods, and purported to deliver you to the flames. It was some kind of necessary cleaning. Their aims, however, did not include redemption. Only ego and only evil. They told everyone you deserved it. They transformed your quiet into guilt, your might into arrogance, and your insight into disobedience. They used you as a scapegoat for whatever they couldn't control, comprehend, or dominate. They didn't want to heal. They looked for a target. So they chose someone who had never fought dirty, the one who continues to forgive, the one who had multiple chances to clap back but didn't. You were innocent, and this is why you are hazardous to them. But this time, heaven will not let it go. God is not turning tragedy into a lesson in suffering for our benefit. This is not about wearing a cross to help others discover grace. The door is closed. They did something unholy. It was unfriendly. Your suffering is no longer being utilized for their redemption. It is being presented as proof. What they did to you resulted in a spiritual bill. Heaven always gathers. They figured they could use you up, drain your energy, assault your reputation, and escape unharmed. However, they did not foresee such a spectacular reversal. God does not disregard what has occurred. He's not using religious language. He calls it what it is: unfair, unpleasant, abusive, and completely responsible. There will be no relief for those who took consolation in your grief. They didn't just abuse you. They misused the soul God had given them. And now, the same agony they sought to erase is in the limelight. Heaven is disclosing every secret plan, muttered malice, every mute witness. Justice is not coming. It's already arrived. Number 7. They established their reputation by sabotaging yours. Heaven is now reversing its currency. They didn't only damage your reputation, they utilized it. They made your struggle into a tale. Your faults become entertainment, and your rehabilitation process becomes a comedy. The more they distorted your image, the more attention they received. The more they humiliated you, the stronger they felt. They elevated their prestige by using your sadness, which they called truth-telling, venting, or just being honest. However, they benefited from your failure. They never anticipated there to be a cost. They earned sympathy, connections, and confidence by putting others against you. They portrayed themselves as the victim, hero, and wise one, while destroying your reputation behind closed doors. But here's something they didn't get. God maintains receipts, and paradise rewards more than just the innocent. It exposes the manipulators. Everything they achieved through shame has now been overturned. The credibility they stole in your name is beginning to crumble. People are waking awake. The truth, which had previously been hidden under layers of falsehoods, is now emerging without your help. Your reputation is being restored spontaneously, without vengeance or reprisal, but by divine intervention. God has the microphone. The audience that once admired your mockers is now concerned. The applause has gone down. The narrative no longer holds true since the fruit does not lie, and those who wanted to hurt you are now suffering severe consequences. Their peace is gone, their favor is fading, and their relationships are fraying because what they established was never genuine. It was based on falsehoods. You do not have to defend yourself. You do not have to explain. Your quietness is not indicative of weakness. It's a strategy. Because while they performed, God planned a divine reversal. And now their greatest disgrace is occurring in the precise places where they previously attempted to humiliate you. That's not a coincidence. That's God ensuring that everyone understands the difference between actual favor and borrowed celebrity. Number 8, heaven was never neutral. It waited for the scales to tilt. You assumed God was quiet because he was attempting to determine who was correct. But there was never any doubt. Heaven was never neutral. God was not pacing the floors of eternity, wondering whether you deserved it. He observed everything from the beginning. Every lie, every stratagem, every time they smiled at you while stabbing you in the back. His quiet did not indicate hesitancy. It was a strategy. He was letting them reveal their whole hand. He let them go as far as they could, not because he was perplexed, but because they were. They believed they were winning. They misinterpreted heaven's tolerance for approval. They assumed that because lightning had not hit the intermediate, they were safe. However, they were unaware that divine time does not operate in the same way that the human ego does. God wasn't in a haste to silence them. He was allowing them to build the same rope on which they would hang their credibility. The longer they spoke, the more they exposed and exploited, the deeper the trap got. Now the scales have tipped. God never compared your value with theirs. This was already determined. He was deciding how much injustice he could tolerate before replying. And now the measure is full. The gavel is coming down. The verdict is obvious. It is fury, not the emotional sort, but the heavenly one, the type that reorganizes everything, the sort that demolishes false power structures and exposes every lie used to further the wrong cause. This is irreversible. No rebranding. No, each of us has made mistakes. Speech is capable of undoing previous actions. They damaged your reputation, tranquility, and spirit. Everything is returning to them, doubled. Not because you wanted it or pleaded for punishment, but because God waited. While we waited, he made justice obvious. You no longer need to support your case. Heaven has already decided in your favor. And now, the same silence that once shielded them is poised to condemn them openly, thoroughly, and permanently. Number 9, they weren't fighting you. They opposed the version of you that God was about to unleash. They were not fighting you. Not really. They were afraid of the version of you that they assumed was on the way. You were cured by your future self. That anointed, uplifted, invincible version of yourself who will expose whatever lie they speak in light of who you really are. They saw some of your potential. They worried rather than cheered. Because if you become the person God said you would be, they would be revealed not just as liars, but also as insecure, manipulating cowards. They acted instantly. They attempted to assassinate you before the ascension. They targeted your name before your platform became prominent. They spread falsehoods, distorted facts, and incited conflict in order to harm your image before people saw the results. They did not just aim to harm you. They were attempting to eliminate the future. But this is what they didn't expect. God let them. They proceeded without being interrupted by God, not because he agreed, but because he had information that the others did not. He realized that any effort to bury you would just set the scenario. Every untruth would become fuel. Each treachery would be discovered. And now that they've tried every strategy, God is promoting you loudly, openly, and unashamedly. Your ascension is the solution. Here is the response. It is an issue of judgment. God did not clap back. He created you. You demonstrated that no weapon created against you was effective. There is no deceit, plotting, or treachery. And now your promotion does more than merely acknowledge you. It condemns them. Not fury, but consequences. Because when others see you achieve despite the defamation heaped on your reputation, they will admit the truth. The falsehoods were not convincing enough since the favor was genuine. Nothing bothers your opponents more than seeing you become unbeatable. Number 10. They misread your benevolence as weakness, which was their undoing. They assumed you didn't fight back because you couldn't. They saw your generosity as weakness. They misread your calm, placid, and elegant demeanor as weakness, nervousness, or self-doubt. They never realized, however, that your silence was not a sin. It was a spiritual practice. It was an excellent alignment. You didn't spare them because they were untouchable. You spared them because you felt protected. You had every opportunity to retaliate. You had enough proof to expose them and enough receipts to burn down the whole circus. You may have matched their intensity while humiliating them in return, but your spirit said, "Don't." Something screamed, "Stand still. This is not your struggle. Let God handle it." So you did. You watched them laugh, exult, and boast as if they had accomplished something, when heaven recognized every act of restraint as righteousness on your behalf. They were too haughty to recognize reality. They concluded that there were no looming implications. They had gotten away with it. This is precisely what pride does. It blinds individuals to God's patience and makes them believe they are invincible. However, compassion is approval, and waiting does not imply denial. Mercy is God deferring judgment to allow people to repent. However, when they utilize the delay to enhance their wickedness, they are unaware that they are slowly, smugly, and in front of an audience constructing their own grave. The wait has finally ended. The sky no longer hold back. The limitation that was imposed on them has been removed, and what's coming has more than simply implications. It is clarity. People will discover what was concealed. Those who laughed with them will come to distrust everything. Their connections will dissolve. Their words will eventually work against them. Because when compassion ceases, exposing starts. And when exposure starts, so does the foolish. They were not unbreakable. They were just being saved because of you. But now that heaven has released the case, their protection is gone. You never had to destroy them. All you needed to do was reject them. And now survival determines their destiny. A number. They said God would do nothing until they learned his delay was a death sentence. They really felt that God would do nothing. They ridiculed your religion. They laughed at your weeping. They triumphantly chanted your name, believing they had silenced heaven with their lives. And when no lightning struck, no doors slammed shut, and you didn't fight back, they became smug and arrogant, certain that God was either sleeping or unconcerned. They mistook celestial delay with divine inactivity, sealing their fate. They failed to see that God's delays are never due to uncertainty. It's because he's gaining weight. Thunder does not burst. When the sky darkens, it waits. It develops. It rumbles under the surface, stretching across time, waiting for the right moment to strike so that the whole continent may hear it. That is how judgment moves. It seems to do more than just terrify folks. It shows up to alter the mood. They believed they had beaten the system. They insisted that if God existed, he would have done something by now. But God was doing something. He was observing. He was recording. He was giving them time to correct their wrongs, repent, and humble themselves. Instead of backing down, they went farther. They ridiculed harder. They rallied more people. They did not only sin. They recruited. God, in his love, continued to wait. However, the delay was not beneficial to them. It was for yours. So when the gavel eventually fell, no one could claim you wished for it. Nobody could blame you since you did not have to move a finger. The thunder's echoes are now pouring in. Everything they accomplished in secret has finally come to light. Those who formerly hailed their wickedness are now pulling away. Their laughter has gone into stillness. Their confidence has faded into uncertainty. They didn't anticipate God to come up in this way. Not quiet or sluggish, but final. This isn't a negotiation. This is revenge. Not because you asked for it, but because heaven approved it. The God they believed was ignoring you is suddenly the one they can't avoid. The delay, which they mistook for safety, was precisely what allowed their judgment to mature. Now the storm has arrived, and they are standing in the thunder that they said would never happen. A number. Your silence was not a weakness. It was a legal tactic for the court of heaven. Your quiet was not a loss. It was not a weakness. It wasn't passivity. It was a strategy. Not in the court of popular opinion, but in the courts of heaven. While they yelled at you, they lied about you and misrepresented everything you said. You maintained your composure. Not because you didn't know what to say, but because you were aware who was looking. You saw something that most people disregard. Sometimes the loudest argument is delivered in silence. Every time you chose peace over retribution, you were constructing a legal argument. Not on earth, but in the invisible world. What they did to you was not unimportant. It was not a minor incident. It was calculated, consistent, and in some instances, brutal beyond description. But instead of fighting evil, you remained clean. You walked away instead of applauding. You kept your head up while they attempted to hide your identity. You sobbed but did not blaspheme. You had a breakdown in private but did not act out in public. And with each choice you took to maintain your integrity, you supplied heaven with further spiritual proof. Restraint speaks volumes. Your silence captured every crime in real time. Every sigh. Every night. You could not sleep. Every second you held your lips, it was recorded in a precious file with your name. The matter has now reached heaven's courts, and the judge does not question his decision. God is moving for you right now because you are quiet. He is not coming in because you yelled loudly enough. He is coming in because your silence revealed who you and they are. Your silence was not empty. It was all about obeying. It was trust. And now it is your weapon. They thought you were disqualified, yet heaven utilized it to qualify you for divine intervention. They believed you lost. They believed you were over. But heaven saw what they didn't. A soul that refused to yield, and a spirit strong enough to believe in God even when it hurts. Your vindication will not come swiftly. It is legally justifiable. Heaven isn't only protecting you emotionally, it protects you legally. The case has been evaluated. The conclusion is definite. It will be loud enough to drown out whatever lies they have ever said. A number. They attempted to write you off. God is now recreating history with your name in gold. They felt they had the last word on your tale. They reasoned that by eliminating your name from conversations, changing events, and telling just enough plausible falsehoods, you would eventually fade into the background. They intended to treat you as a footnote in a story they controlled. So they exploited rumor to conceal the truth. They took your name off of the rooms you helped create. They murmured just enough poison to sway public opinion. And for a time, it seemed to work. People became chilly and doors closed. Your character was questioned, and you were avoided. However, there is an unexpected storyline twist. God has editing power over your tale. Heaven does not need their agreement to alter the script. Every chapter that they tried to remove is being restored, not just healed, but also redeemed. Your name is not only being cleansed, it is being crowned. Because when God repairs, He does more than just replace what was shattered. He raises it in front of the people who attempted to destroy it. You see, this is not your typical vindication. This is great editing. God is not just revising a few pages. He's rewriting the whole history. The pen is dipped in justice. K is infused with dignity. The particular instances they attempted to remove are now the reason you're being promoted. The precise name they wanted to tarnish is now permanently inscribed in gold. Here's the greatest part. Heaven doesn't ask your enemies for permission. They don't have a vote. They are not allowed to modify. They cannot insert footnotes or disclaimers in the miracle. God is writing in your life. All they can do now is watch God lift the name that they vowed would never rise again. Your narrative isn't complete. It was just interrupted. However, God is restarting the story, and the following section is written with pride, dignity, and unflinching strength. People who attempt to write you out will discover your name inscribed in chambers that they will never be allowed to access again. That is not revenge. This is what happens when heaven communicates the truth. A number. They attempted to invalidate you. Now God is demanding. They openly validate you. They believe they could get away with treating you like nothing. Then proceed discreetly. They discredited you blatantly. They now want to make peace amid the darkness. They propagate falsehoods in vast numbers, yet wish to apologize in small groups. However, God will not accept it. Not this time. Not after everything they've done. What they don't realize is that repentance entails more than just feeling awful. It's about setting things right. They didn't only damage your emotions. They harmed your reputation. They ruined your reputation in locations where you were unable to defend yourself. And now God isn't asking for silent regret. He is seeking public reparation. The same voices that insulted you will be expected to rectify the situation with similar zeal. They ridiculed you openly. They should now happily respect you. They influenced others to look down on you. They'll have to point those same folks back at you and admit they were incorrect. Spiritual justice precludes shame. It is about divine equilibrium. What was done in public has to be mended in public. Anything less would be incomplete regret. And heaven does not provide partial healing. This goes beyond vindication. This is a spiritual transaction. It is a kind of repair. Respect, opportunity, and reputation have been robbed from you, and they must be repaid with interest. God is not playing with your name. He noticed how humiliated you were. He noted you were quiet, calm, and courteous while they dragged you. And now the gavel has dropped. Heaven does not want a private apology. It wants public approval. And they will have a choice. Restore the elements they have deleted from your picture, or face the judgment that follows when God has to do it for them. Regardless, you will be recognized loudly, clearly, and strongly. Because heaven heals more than just reputations. It also restores dignity. When God comes in, He does more than simply protect your reputation. He establishes it. Allow them to speak. Allow them to distort their narrative, alter chronology, and claim innocence. Because at the end of the day, there was a judge who saw everything. The courts of heaven are no longer on vacation. The gavel has struck. The verdict was engraved in flames. And the truth. Your truth will be louder than any deception they attempted to cover you with. You were not just assaulted. You were targeted because of your brilliance. You weren't just rejected. You were sacrificed so that their shadows would not seem as dismal. They never expected this, however. You were selected not for destruction, but rather for divine manifestation. They believed that the anguish would kill you. They believed their manipulation would define you. However, they just made you noticeable. The ashes they attempted to bury you in are now the ink God is using to rewrite the next chapter of your life. It's etched with large gold lettering. It is not only about justice. It is about reversal. It's about God changing the stage that they attempted to set against you and turning it into a platform. Not merely to yell, "I told you so," but now you may walk with unmistakable evidence that heaven always wins, even if it takes a bit longer than intended. You will not have to argue. You do not need to clap back. The outcomes will speak louder than any words you might say. So do not shrink. Do not underestimate your value because others are too damaged to recognize it. God is moving, and He will not come to soothe us. He is coming as an avenger, not because you pleaded, but because He is righteous. And kindness always corrects wrongdoing. Your name will be restored. Your story will be reported honestly. And those who believe they could get away with defying you will either openly recognize the light they attempted to extinguish or see personally what happens when heaven reacts with holy fire. God is not just vindicating you. He's establishing you. So remove your hands off the wheel. The chosen one. It is no longer your war. Now it is time for God to shine. And you are the headline. If this message sparked a fire in your heart and spoke to the truth, you have been carrying it in silence. Do not let it finish here. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss another word intended just for you. Like this video to show the algorithm that the truth is still important. Leave a comment below. Tell us how this spoke to you, what you've been through, and how you're overcoming it. Your voice might be the affirmation someone else needs. Most essential, please send this letter to anybody who has been wrongly judged, abused, or silenced. Let them know that heaven isn't disregarding their grief. God is preparing for their return. Let us disseminate divine justice far and wide. We are not just establishing a community. We're launching a movement. And your being here indicates that the chosen are rising, one truth at a time.